Hey, I'm Luke. Here we discover albums that are truly vinyl worthy. In this series we dive deep into the discographies of various artists, album by album, song by song, in the search for vinyl worthy releases. My criteria for a vinyl worthy album is simple. It must be a collection of tracks that I enjoy from start to finish, with no tracks that I wish to skip. If an artist features in this series, then you can guarantee that at least one of their releases is considered vinyl worthy. Let's jump right into it. When I think about David Bowie and the legacy he has left, I like to think about new generations. His name recognition may dwindle into only being uttered by musos and future hipsters, but I believe his music will never exit pop culture. If we had a Mount Rushmore of music pop culture, I believe David Bowie is on there. David died in 2016, almost 10 years ago, and people may stop recognizing David Bowie for his name, but I imagine today, and in the future, much of the Western world will recognise his music or enjoy music that has been directly influenced by him. After all, it is this kind of osmosis that led me to discovering David. Now I must confess, David Bowie was always a confusing figure for me growing up, and I suppose that's not so unique of a feeling though, as when I speak to boomers or Gen Xers about Bowie, even they were mostly confused by him. But anyways, my initial exposure to Bowie would have been around as early as my memory begins, at around age 8 or 9. I first was put through his pairings with Bing Crosby and Mick Jagger, both of which I thought were incredibly lame. Where the confusion lay for me was mostly due to that bad first impression, and when over the years I found people praising Bowie, I found it hard to believe that someone who committed such an atrocity as dancing in the street could ever redeem themselves. Dancing in the street. But I soon learned. Around the same time, I would have heard Under Pressure with Queen and Bowie. However, 10-year-old Luke was more fascinated with Bohemian Rhapsody and how Under Pressure sounded the same as Ice Ice Baby. A few years later again, I would recognise Bowie for his role as Nikola Tesla in The Prestige, and also his song Heroes was featured and revered in Perks of Being a Wallflower. Some years again later, when I was in university, I made a very good new friend, and his dad is a serious David Bowie fan. His enthusiasm primed me for the day that I would find David live in a record store in my mid-20s. I decided to give it a go, and I was pleasantly surprised. My next exploration was with Let's Dance. Let's Dance was his most successful album, unbeknownst to me at the time, and it demonstrated a little bit to me how his sound had developed since his pre-1974 material from David Live. I then watched Labyrinth featuring Bowie, Moon Age Daydream, a documentary on his life, and Velvet Goldmine, a film heavily inspired by Bowie and his relationship with Iggy Pop. It's only more recently I went through every Bowie LP, including live albums as a bonus, and this is how I feel about his music.
What the hell is that?
Not one I will be returning to anytime soon. Let's just call this one a false start. But it is a fascinating listen as a one-off. And if you're a music completionist like me, then you gotta hear it all the way through at least one time. Moving on to his second album, also called David Bowie, and I guess to avoid any confusion, it's also aka Space Oddity, so probably better known as Space Oddity at this point. This is a big improvement. Ultimately, I think this album has one problem, and it's a good problem to have, and that's the strength of the opening track, Space Oddity. This is up there as one of David Bowie's most essential songs. For good reason, it is phenomenal. I like to imagine this as the true beginning of David Bowie. It's a perfect song. At 2 minutes and 41, it's up there with one of the best moments in all of music. This album is not fantastic. It's not even great, I would say. I'd say it is just pretty good, but Space Odyssey is really the highlight here. As you can see, I do rate the final track Memory of a Free Festival. It's David Bowie's own Hey Jude, in my opinion. The melody reminds me of the chorus to Bon Jovi's Bad Medicine, also. But with tracks like Unwashed and Somewhat Slightly Dazed, it was always going to be hard to follow up to Space Odyssey, but this track doesn't do a bad job. On track 3, Letter to Hermione, David's voice is showcased very well here. Track 4, it's quite proggy. It shifts into gear around 5 minutes in, but I don't blame anyone for wanting to skip this track. I can tolerate it. Janine is the most straightforward pop rock song from David yet. It's quite catchy. Track 6 is very forgettable and an easy skip for me. Track 7, Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud, is similar to Signet Committee, where this track takes about halfway through to really develop, and the strings are great in this, I gotta say. The next track, God Knows I'm Good, is solid, and yep, as mentioned, Memory of a Free Festival is a great closer. Now onto his third LP, The Man Who Sold the World. They're going for a much heavier sound, and none of these tracks work for me. The Man Who Sold the World is the obvious best track. However, Nirvana's live version is way better for me, and I actively dislike the production on Bowie's album version. But yeah, after a few listens of this album trying to get into it, I just can't. Next up is Hunky Dory, and David diverts again into a more softer acoustic direction. On the opening track, Changes, I love the production on this, how the vocals come in on the first occurrence of the chorus, where it's just the vocals and the string. Chef's kiss on that. For the follow-up, Oh You Pretty Things, I'm not really that big on this track, that's why it gets this rating. 8-line poem is skippable, but Life on Mars is one of my favourite tracks of all time. It's perfect. David's vocals and the strings in the chorus are out of this world. Kooks is tolerable, and the rest I skip other than Queen Bitch, where it's got a great riff and I enjoy the groove. I know there's a lot of love for Hunky Dory, so I expect for quite a lot of Bowie fans they'll be saying what is wrong with me on my ratings for quite a few of these tracks though. Next up we have this classic. 5 Years, one of Bowie's best tracks in my opinion. Soul Love next, and I thought I was listening to T-Rex when this first came on. Moon Age Daydream is a great song, topped off with one hell of an ending. Starman is a lovely song, but it doesn't really stand out to me as a personal favourite, although I know it is very, very popular. It Ain't Easy is solid. Lady Stardust is also as well. I love the chorus, but when we get to Star, it feels like a total filler track. Hang On To Yourself, it reminds me of the Replacements song Favourite Thing with the riff. However, I think that Favourite Thing is a much better song. With Ziggy Stardust, it is so surprising to me how the song is only 3 minutes and 13, because it feels like we go and cover so much ground in just such a short amount of time. Suffragette City is a keeper, but there are better live versions, such as on Welcome to the Blackout being my favourite. And this is probably going to be controversial again, but Rock and Roll Suicide doesn't do anything for me, so I skip it. Aladdin Sane as an album, it doesn't hit quite the same for me, and I skip quite a lot of the tracks on it. Aladdin Sane, I do like this one. Panic in Detroit is also a highlight. The percussion on the track itself is a highlight as well. And Cracked Actor is an easy keeper, but ever since hearing the David Live version with horns, I prefer it, and would even pick the Serious Moonlight version over the David Live version. Next up is Pinups, and I'm in agreement with a lot of Bowie fans that this album is a bit of a swing and a miss. It's a cover album, and there's only really one keeper from it that I have, and that's Here Comes the Night. There is a popular track with Sorrow, but I prefer the Mersey's original version, and if we're going to go for Bowie, then I'd say save it for, again, the Serious Moonlight live album. Okay, 1974, Diamond Dogs. And this is so close to being vinyl worthy. Future Legend is pretty much just the intro to Diamond Dogs, and Diamond Dogs would be a keeper, but the album version is produced to sound live, and the 2016 remaster feels so flat. The 1999 remaster is much better, or I recommend listening to the live Nassau, or even David Live would sound better than this current remaster version. So Sweet Thing all the way to the Reprise are kind of like just one thing, and David's vocals on this are maybe my favourite he ever did. When he sings Will You See That I'm Scared and I'm Lonely in particular, oh, sounds incredible. What a performance. Rebel Rebel. The original mix once again sounds better. I also love the live arrangements with the additional backing vocals. It's just such a great track. I think it's timeless. Rock and Roll With Me is a lovely ballad, and Bowie's performance once again is brilliant. And the one skipper we have is We Are the Dead. The track meanders into nothing, and it's so forgettable. It's an easy skip as much as it pains me that it is on this album, and it makes it not vinyl worthy, with my criteria at least. 1984 is a pillar. It's funky and groovy. So is Big Brother in the sense that it's a pillar, not quite so funky and groovy, but the chorus hits me so good. And the final track, I just consider it to be a bolt-on extension of Big Brother. So yeah, this all comes under one. Okay, so Young Americans, and this is David in his Plastic Soul era. I love this album. With his new reinvented sound, he starts and finishes with, in my opinion, two of his best songs. The rest of the album, minus Fascination, doesn't quite reach the same brilliance, but nonetheless does a great job. If Across the Universe was removed, this would no doubt be Bowie's most flawless album. I highly recommend, if you like anything about David Bowie whatsoever, this is the one that you gotta listen to, because I think a lot of people miss out on this one. And next we have another incredible album with Station to Station. The opening track absolutely slaps. It's a perfect track. We have another pillar again with Golden Years, and the vibe on this one is just so good, so cool. Word on a Wing grew on me to be a keeper. TVC15 is a real fun one, and Stay, like Station to Station, rips. Awesome track. Finally, we have Wild as the Wind, and this is a cover, and I thought it was the song that was the issue, but then I listened to George Michael and Cat Power's version, and I much prefer those versions over this one. Ultimately, this album is another contender for my favourites. The track ordering feels janky to me though, so I'd personally list the tracks in this order. So at this stage in his life, Bowie was going through some serious addiction, especially to cocaine. He decided he was going to get clean. He paired up with his friend Iggy Pop, who was also looking to get clean at this stage, and the following is considered the Berlin Trilogy, which is where a lot of the material across the next three albums was produced. The first of the trilogy is Low, and this is considered to be one of the most influential albums due to its sound production, especially with Brian Eno's contributions. The first two tracks are pretty good. They could grow on me. What in the World is a keeper, but the live version on Serious Moonlight is an improvement. And then with track 4, Sound and Vision, I think The Cure owe a lot to the synth in this one. And as a track itself, it's one of the most feel-good ones out there. Always Crashing in the Same Car does nothing for me, so I skip it. With Be My Wife, I love this track. And same with A New Career in a New Town. It evokes a strange mix of reflective nostalgia, but with a futuristic element about it. The remainder of the album are more experimental instrumentals, and out of these I would pick Subterraneans as being the better of the bunch, and the rest I would skip. Next up is Heroes, and with track number 1, Beauty and the Beast, it's like a blend between TVC15 and the experimental production of Low. Joe the Lion, again, is a real interesting one when it comes to sound production, and I enjoy it quite a lot. Next up, Heroes is deserving of all of the adoration that it gets. It is a perfect track. The next track is a skipper for me though, but Blackout is a potential pillar. Maybe one day. V2 Schneider is a fine little track, but Sense of Doubt I skip. But Moss Garden is purely instrumental, and it's a super relaxing ambient style track. I skip New Colne, but with the final track, The Secret Life of Arabia, surely this must have inspired The Clash. It's an awesome track, easy pillar. And now we're on to the final of the Berlin Trilogy with Lodger. I'd say this is probably the weakest of the trilogy, but it's got a few tracks that I keep, such as African Night Flight. This is like entering a psychosis, but I like it. I also like Yassassin. It has a good groove to it. DJ is a very solid track. Look Back in Anger is a pillar for me. The bass and percussion drive this one so well. I really enjoy the vocals on it too. Red Money is a funky groove and great production as well. It's worth noting as well that Adrian Bellew is on this album, and you may recognise him from his work with Talking Heads, Frank Zappa, King Crimson. I mean, incredible, awesome artists. And yeah, I kind of feel his influence on this, even if it didn't really reach the heights as, say, the previous two of the trilogy. So now we're on to Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, and it's interesting, this album, because of where it sits in David's discography. It's almost like the middle point of his career, I'd say, and if we reflect back on the work that he's done previously, especially with his vocal range and abilities, he's not going to be reaching that same register that he was able to in the likes of songs with Sweet Thing, where he hits those high notes so sweetly. But yeah, he's not able to do that anymore. I heard that he was a very bad chain smoker, so that would have really done a number on his vocal abilities over the years. So with this album, I'd say that this is a nice transitionary album from, we've got a bit of his experimental stuff from the Berlin trilogy. You've got some callbacks to the Ziggy years with Ashes to Ashes, which is a fantastic song. Easy Pillar is produced incredibly. And then you got songs like Fashion, which is one of my favourites. It's such a head bopper. It's funky as hell. The guitar tone on Carlos's stabs are a highlight in a track full of great production. And it feels like a callback to Fame as well. And I gotta say, like, Carlos Alamar's guitar work is one of the most important details of my love for David Bowie's music. I don't want to imagine what David Bowie's music would have been like without Carlos Alomar involved in some kind of way. Since we're talking about the tracks, let's just continue on with that. So Teenage Wildlife, we've got a lovely track and it's a great performance. It makes its way into being a pillar. Scream Like a Baby had potential, but it feels like it never really commits to the chorus groove-wise. Kingdom Come is a cover of Tom Verlaine from his solo album. That was after he'd finished with the band Television, who are brilliant. I highly recommend checking those out. And on this track, I prefer Tom's vocals on his version to Bowie's vocals on his version. However, I prefer the production on Bowie's version, so it's a bit complicated, but yeah. And then as for the rest of the tracks, like It's No Game, oh my god, like both the first and the final track, I hate them. easy skip. And Scary Monsters and Super Creeps is kind of a difficult one for me to pin down as well, because I don't really like the song, if I'm honest, but I can tolerate the Serious Moonlight version. And Up the Hill Backwards, I love the vocals on this one. It reminds me of Talking Heads' Road to Nowhere with the gang vocals, but the rest of the arrangement prevents this one from being a pillar. Very close to being a pillar, but just not quite there. And now we are on to Let's Dance, which, as mentioned in the intro, is the peak success of David Bowie's career. Opening on Modern Love, it's a great opener, potentially overplayed, I guess, but not as much as Let's Dance, that's for sure. It's a pillar for me. I never really cared for China Girl. The live version on Serious Moonlight is better, so I can listen to that version over this one. With Let's Dance, it's overplayed for me at this point, so yeah, it's in that awkward territory of, yeah, I like the song, but I'm really trying to avoid hearing it because it's just, still to this day, it's like almost everywhere. Without You is fine, but forgettable. It's good that it's short, so I don't feel myself needing to skip it because it's just fine. Ricochet is decent. Criminal World, I actually prefer Metro's original version of this. So Cat People is a complicated one for me. I think it's got a great opening riff, but the problem is it's mostly downhill from there. I much prefer this album version over the original recording, as the original recording was for the soundtrack to the film Cat People. I've not seen the film, I have little interest unless someone suggests it to me that I respect. And again, the Serious Moonlight version of this song is the better version. And finally, we have Shake It. Oh my god, this track is cursed. It's so bad. I also believe, without properly looking into this, but I'm pretty sure that, is it Mick Ronson or Mark Ronson? Mick Ronson was the guitarist, wasn't he? Yeah, it's Mark Ronson, the producer, I believe. And he did Acceptable in the 80s, and I'm pretty sure that that is either sampling or, at the very least, interpolating this track, which does actually a better job than the cursed sound of this song, let's say. Okay, now on to Serious Moonlight. So Serious Moonlight is the live album following on from the tour of the same name, which was to promote the success of Let's Dance. And it's actually vinyl worthy. So when I was making my live albums video, which is my previous video, I just about finished up with that video, and within the same week had discovered Serious Moonlight. So yeah, it would have belonged onto that video, but I've been researching for this video for months and months and months, so yeah, it's just been a bit all over the place with the release schedule and everything. But yeah, this is kind of what makes Bowie qualify for the series, is this live album. Some other good live releases from Bowie are Live at Nassau, Welcome to the Blackout especially is brilliant, and even David Live has some moments. So we're at another turning point in David's career, where following on from the success of Let's Dance and the Serious Moonlight tour, he was facing some serious writer's block as he'd acquired a new audience to his music, and he couldn't quite identify or find his own identity in who he really was anymore. So the next two releases, bear in mind that David looks back on this period as being probably his least creative, but let's see if he was giving himself too much of a hard time. And when it comes to Tonight, I think he actually was giving himself too much of a hard time. Now, don't get me wrong, I really do believe that his cover of the Beach Boys' God Only Knows is one of the most horrific covers of one of the most brilliant songs I've ever heard. And I'm not a fan of Loving the Alien or Blue Jean, but the rest of the album is actually quite redeemable. With Don't Look Down, it's a cover of Iggy Pop's track, and I find it better than Iggy's original. David really pulls off on the reggae, and I love the arrangement. And then on the title track Tonight with Tina Turner, again, it's a cover from Iggy Pop, so yeah, it's not original material, but he would have worked on that material with Iggy back when he was producing for him on his album anyway, so it's partially his, I suppose. And yeah, I do prefer this arrangement. I think they do a really lovely job on this track. And then Neighborhood Fret, again, another Iggy Pop combo, and this time I prefer Iggy's original overall, but Bowie's version is good production wise, but I find Bowie's performance is a bit lost. Tumble and Twirl, this is a beach party track, close to a pillar for me. I keep forgetting a cover from Chuck Jackson, and the cover is fine, but it's better that it's on the short side, as if it was overstaying its welcome, I probably would end up skipping this. And finally, Dancing with the Big Boys. The guitar in the intro reminds me of The Police, and the horns and the backing vocals are the highlights to this track. It's not far off actually being a pillar. Yeah, I really rate it. And then we have Never Let Me Down, and okay, yes, this album really shows its age, but there are some songs I enjoy, as you can see again. These songs are catchy, and David's performances come across as earnest. The rest can definitely be skipped though. So we've got Day In, Day Out. It's a little longer than necessary, but Time Will Crawl is solid. Beat of Your Drum, not too bad. It's all about the chorus on this one. And finally, Bang Bang, another one from Iggy Pop originally, and I love this track. It's better than Iggy's original version, and the backing vocals are the best addition. It's awesome. Alright, so Never Let Me Down let down David so much that we got 2 Tin Machine albums.
Okay, people, move along. There's nothing to see here.
All jokes aside, this is worth noting that at this point in his career, David does not attempt to make the same commercial success as he did with Let's Dance. And so that's quite commendable. And also take note that when Tin Machine was formed, that Bowie would then continue to work with guitarist Reeves Gabrels for almost the remainder of his career. And I gotta say, I'm not really a fan of Gabrels' guitar playing, especially just not his style. I don't doubt that he's a brilliant guitarist and very capable, but his own style of playing is just not for me, especially when I compare it to the likes of Carlos Alomar, who I just love his style of playing. When David returned to his solo career, he gave us Black Tie White Noise, and it's mostly a miss of an album, but it is a fascinating one for his direction of sound production. This kind of production was quite early. I think Brian Eno with John Cale was 3 years earlier with the likes of Wrong Way Up. Highly recommend the track Spinning Away. For perspective, it was on the soundtrack for Danny Boyle's The Beach from 2000, and it doesn't at all sound 7 years old next to the more contemporary tracks, such as All Saints Pure Shores. But anyways, back onto Bowie. So, amongst this album is Jump They Say, and Jump They Say is one of my favourite tracks from Bowie. It is ace. And then we got Miracle Goodnight, and it's an easy breezy fun track. It's not as great in my opinion as Jump They Say, but still kind of a pillar. We also got some extras following on from this album, and this is where I believe Lucy Can't Dance was released, and why this one was held off from being released I have no idea. Apparently Nile Rodgers thought this was a banger, and I'm in total agreement with him. Lucy Can't Dance is easily one of my favourite Bowie tracks. The Rivers and Rhythm remix of Jump They Say is a great mix, however the ending Past the Peak goes on too long, otherwise this would be a pillar for the euphoric heights it reaches for me. David's next release, The Buddha of Suburbia, is very much a miss for me, however Untitled No. 1 functions really well as a groovy background track. Alright, next up we have number 1, Outside the Nathan Adler Diaries, A Hypercycle. This was meant to be at least a trilogy, I believe, but it never really happened. We just got this one. It follows on with a concept, and I'll be honest, I didn't really follow along with the concept. I just took it as song for song, and that's how my mind works with this album, as a lot of this is skippable. But there are some decent tracks. So starting with Hello Space Boy. I first heard this during the film Moon Age Daydream. It intrigued me as it was a heavy electronic sounding Bowie that I hadn't heard before. Now remember, when I first watched Moon Age Daydream, I wasn't all that familiar with David Bowie, so yeah, this came as a bit of a surprise when I first heard it. And in this context, it's a solid attempt, having heard the full song that is. It fizzles out of excitement around 3 minutes in, as it doesn't move anywhere that warrants the extra length. For those who know what's coming up next with Earthling, this is an interesting track because it is very proto-Earthling, and perhaps it makes more sense being on there as a track, really. One of my favourite tracks on this album is I Have Not Been to Oxford Town. It's a comfy melodic track with really good production, and again, We Prick You has great production. I enjoy the performance and melodies. I'm Deranged Grew on Me. Through These Architects' Eyes, the guitar production is the highlight, and Strangers When We Meet. There is a version on The Buddha of Suburbia, however the version of this song on this album is way better. It's comfy as hell, this song. So now we have Earthling, and at this point in his career, David seemed to be best friends with Trent Reznor. So altogether, I think a lot of the ideas on this album were there and they really could have worked well, but the execution just was quite lacking and it goes over the top in certain parts. But it's got a couple of keepers like Little Wonder and Dead Man Walking. It's pulsating, driving, and it does rock. On 7 Years in Tibet, the quiet and loud works for me, and I'm Afraid of Americans. It had the potential, but it doesn't move beyond its initial idea enough for me, and it becomes a bit repetitive. It reminds me of Taking Back Sunday's El Paso. And El Paso is the better track because it reaches an intensity that I feel I'm Afraid of Americans was begging for. Law, Earthling, the final track reminds me of the Command & Conquer Red Alert Retaliation soundtrack, but not as good. Moving on to his next album, Hours, and this is a very forgettable album altogether, but the opening track, Thursday's Child, is lovely. It's got super smooth strings, and the background vocals work very well here for me. 2002, David gave us Heathen, and again, this one doesn't really do all that much for me. Slip Away is another one that feels like it had unrealised potential. The chorus seemed like it was really going places, but it failed to hit the spot for me. A Better Future has a cutesy charm to it, where I guess I gotta really be in the mood for hearing it. But next up is Reality, and this, in my opinion, is a big return to form. The opening track, New Killer Star, it reminds me of late 70s Bowie, and track 2, Pablo Picasso, we actually got a pillar. So this is better than both the original and John Cale's version. David's performance is great, and I love the added instruments in the arrangement, especially the cheeky horns. On the next track, I give it green for the chorus, orange for the verse, but it balances more towards being orange than green. On The Lonelier Sky, David's performance is the highlight, but the song had potential for a more memorable instrumental though. Looking for Water is quite straightforward, a solid song. She'll Drive the Big Car. I'm liking the production on this funky track. It could grow on me, but I think that it's a bit more back-ended. My enjoyment of the track, it takes a bit of time to get into it. We have a run of 4 tracks then that I skip until we get to Bring Me the Disco King. This has a fantastic performance, great production and arrangement considering it would have been released as far back as 93 on Black Tie White Noise. I think this benefits from being on this album, which doesn't have so much of a cohesive sound direction like his previous work did. Like, this would have really felt out of place on Black Tie White Noise, if it was released in this state at least. Track 12, Carlos Alomar is back, and I can kinda tell with how fun his work is. David adds lots of tension to the song's composition, which makes this quite a duplicitous track instead of what could have been a simple bop. Classic David move. Track 13, very filler, much skip. And the last track we get another version of Rebel Rebel, and it's solid, but what I most appreciate is that it feels like a pure and sincere release. Like, this could have come across as a try-hard effort, but it wasn't. I feel like it had a missed opportunity with not ending on a big final chorus. So yeah, the ending felt a little subdued. Now we're getting to late stage David Bowie, and we have The Next Day. It's not really for me, this album. There's a couple of keepers, such as The Stars Are Out Tonight. The strings and the bass are highlights. It's got a good arrangement and production. If You Can See Me, I love the intro. The verses move into a more experimental sound, and then the chorus relieves the tension. I kind of like it overall, but yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. And then I also like How Does the Grass Grow, where I love the high-pitched la-la-las. And You Will Set the World on Fire is a keeper as well. It's got great guitar tone and production. Solid song. And now we're on to Blackstar, David Bowie's final LP. And he was struggling with his health at this point, and this is his swan song, as many people have pointed out. I know there's a lot of love for this final LP of his, and I appreciate moments of it, but ultimately I don't give it quite as much praise altogether, track for track. But let's just talk about it. So we got Blackstar, and yeah, this track never sat totally right with me. It sits in this zone, like, of being orange, but could it go either way over time? It's got great production nonetheless. Track 3, Lazarus, is gorgeous in every kind of way. It earns the pillar status. And then the final track, I Can't Give Everything Away, as well. Again, just so gorgeous. It's a beautiful battle with himself, and I really love the callback to a new career in a new town with the harmonica. And just as a little quick bonus, technically there is the No Plan EP from 2017 after David's death, and other than the track Lazarus, which I've covered before, the rest of this is very much a skipper for me. No Plan does nothing for me, and Killing a Little Time is a big skip. Yeah, not good. So there we have it. That's all of my ratings for pretty much all of David Bowie's LPs, at least. I know he's probably got quite a bit of singles and EPs that I may not have covered. I know for the likes of, like I mentioned, Under Pressure, that is a pillar, just for the sake of saying it. And then, if you hadn't guessed already, I still detest Dancing in the Street. I don't think I'll ever come round on that. So I had a really good time going through all of David Bowie's discography. It took quite a bit of time, but it was very, very worth it. Thanks for watching this episode. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. Drop me a comment on where you agree or disagree, or share something interesting that I may have missed. Alright, peace and love, bye 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 bye.